but this is a good watch. This watch you can buy for about $100. For me, this is, again, except for the size, this is about as good as it gets for a watch. And I don't need more of a watch than this. Green, ceramic, sapphire, day and date, and it's automatic. That's pretty much ass kicking. So this watch cost about $120. So I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're all enjoying the first few days. Most of you are on vacation. The first few days of 2026, which for us Americans is going to be a hell of a year, as I mentioned recently. So that's all I'm going to say. I'll close out this video. This has been Dr. Vasquez, the OG, coming to you live and talking about watches. Take care and have a great weekend. Bye. So I'm the original gangster of vitamin D.
OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster.
What's going on, everybody? Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live for the first time in 2026. Today is the 2nd of January, and right now the time has come, no pun intended, I suppose, the time has come for us to talk about watches. So I am going to talk about watches, like watches. And I'm going to talk about men's watches because I don't know, I can't say I know anything about women, let alone their watches. So I am going to talk about men's watches. And cause that's the only thing I have any experience with, except for buying watches for my wife, which she hardly ever uses. But she loves them in the moment of purchase. And then, of course, the batteries go dead, and then we have to go get the batteries replaced. So anyway, that actually does fit into what I'm about to talk about. Because I never, personally, buy a watch that needs a battery, because I hate dealing with the stupid logistical details of life, let alone looking at my watch and seeing that it doesn't have charge. And then, furthermore, having to go find a store to change the battery or whatever. I don't want to deal with that. So I avoid that by using only self-charging watches, like solar watches, or automatic watches, with two exceptions, because I do have two watches that are manually wound. And that's a pain in the ass, and that's why I don't use those watches very often, because I don't want to have to wind them. They're also two of my kind of dress watches, so for that reason I don't wear them very commonly. So I'm going to talk about two watches that I have purchased actually just within the past year of 2025. And I'm going to show you the details of these watches, and while I'm detailing these watches, I want you to guess, because you're going to guess anyway, I want you to guess how much these watches cost. So the rule of watches is identical to what I've already talked about when I talked about wine. And that is the rule of wine, which I learned from the actor and comedian John Cleese. His rule of wine, so to speak, is that a good wine is a wine that you like and that you're willing to pay for. And the same thing applies to watches. You can take or leave everything I'm about to say, but it is the gospel and the truth, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. No, that's just a joke. So a good watch is just one that you like. You don't have, let me just say this my way. Part of, being a man or being an adult is you have to make your own decisions. And so that means everything about your life, your house, your car, if you have a car, how you dress, what you do, how you let people treat you and all that. That is all, everything in the adult world is up to you. And obviously that applies to watches. So let's dive into, no pun intended, we're going to talk about a diving watch. This is a watch that I bought last year, and I love it. And so I'm going to talk about this watch. I'm going to talk about why it's awesome. I'm going to talk about a current problem that I have with this watch, and why this watch is awesome. So this is called a diver watch because you can see it has a diver bezel on it, and it's rated to 660 feet or 200 meters. Now, some of you might say, well, what the hell do I need a watch that goes down to 200 meters for? I mean, that's like 20 stories. I'm not going to go 20 stories below the water surface or 660 feet. No, you're not. You would probably be dead by then, just like anybody else. These are called, at this level, these are called professional diving watches, because theoretically you would have to be a professional diver to go that far deep. But the reason that a watch like this is still reasonable and practical is because the rating isn't simply for the depth, even though it's usually described in terms of depth. Usually it's meters and feet. Also ATM, which is atomic pressure, or atmospheric pressure, I should say. And the purpose of the rating is so that you understand, obviously, the level of resistance. It's not to say that you're going to go 200 meters below the sea or 660 feet. But when you're doing things in the water, like showering or diving or whatever, you have to think of the pressure that could potentially infiltrate, allow infiltration into the watch. So it's not simply depth. So for example, like a 100, like a 10 ATM is 100 meters. So that would make it 330 feet. That's only rated so that you can shower in it. So 100 meters is only equivalent to taking a shower. So a 200 meter watch, which is what I typically use, means you can swim in it and maybe go snorkel diving or snorkeling or whatever, or you can dive into the water. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to go 200 meters into the water. So anyway, like I said, like I started to say, this watch is awesome. And I'm going to tell you what I paid for it. I'm going to tell you what you could pay for it. And why this would be a good choice. And I'll tell you, it only has 2 problems, so I'll tell you about the problems as well. Obviously, I've disconnected this from the band recently. The band that it originally came with is this one, which is awesome, a good multi-purpose steel watch. I typically used it with a replacement $10 plastic watch, as you can see here. Or sorry, watch band, I should say. And that's fine as well. I guess since I'm looking at this, I'll tell you what I'm looking at. These pins that hold the band onto the watch are called push pins. It is the standard for just about all watches, and I happen to not like it, of course. I've got one other watch that actually screws in the pins, and I like that a lot better because it's more solid. Somebody could probably pull this off my wrist, and because you can see the pin itself is like literally microscopic. It's like 1 or 2 millimeters worth of steel. So somebody could pull that off your wrist or my wrist. And so I have one watch that actually has screw-in pins, and I like it better. I wish all watches were that way. But typically they're just push pins. So you can change out the band. So 200 meters of water resistance. It has a rotating bezel, which you can use to time whatever, from diving to when your wine is ready to drink after you let it sit there for 15 minutes to get the sulfites out. I talked about that before. And also, if you're at a restaurant and you're in a bad mood and you think you're about to get bad service, you could time how bad the service is. So whatever, do whatever you want. You can time whatever you want. I'm personally, sometimes I'm a little bit obsessive about numbers and timing and stuff. So I time myself doing whatever, walking to the metro station or doing whatever. How long does it take me to do whatever? Like yesterday, with this watch, I actually timed myself walking back from the grocery store, and it was exactly 8 minutes. Because I sometimes use either one of 2 different routes, and they're both exactly 8 minutes. Not too surprising. Anyway, this is a really good watch. I'll give you the details on it. You can see from the backside glass crystal that this is an automatic watch, which means as long as I'm moving reasonably, this watch will charge itself by the gravity weight in the back. Like I said, I like that because I do not have the personality or the patience to change batteries. You can believe that. So the other thing that I like about these types of watches is that it obligates me to be physically active. Because I've seen this happen. This watch charges very well. But if I'm just sitting around at the desk not doing exercise, it'll stop running, and I'll have to get in there and unscrew it and then recalibrate the time and the date, and I don't want to do that. So if I am active and obviously wearing the watch, then it stays charged because of the weight in the back. Is it spinning? No, it's just moving a little bit. So you can see that. This watch also it's obviously analog, and it also has the date, as you can see, with a little bubble there. Some would say that this is a copy of a Rolex, and I would say that it's not a copy of a Rolex, because this is made by a company called Invicta, and they actually started before Rolex. I think Invicta started, I think I've seen 2 different years, but one of the years was either 1837 or the other year was like 1890 something, and Rolex was founded in 1907. So Invicta has actually been around longer than Rolex, and their task, their goal, which is different from Rolex, is their business mission was to create elegant watches that were affordable. Rolex, as you know, just creates watches and they charge like crazy, you know, like 5,000, 10,000 and more, 20,000 bucks for a watch. I think that's absurd. I don't care how much money you have or how much money anybody has. I think paying $5,000 for a watch is stupid. You can do better things with your money than that, and you can certainly help people and do other things with your money. So I think that's about all I want to say about this watch. I wish it had screwed-in pins instead of push pins, but push pins are the standard. The crystal on this is a little bit weak. It's just a glass crystal. It's not sapphire. Sapphire is the durability standard. You can see it has a bubble for the date, and the little bubble is not perfectly set. So I noticed that it's a little bit off, probably by like, you know, 1/10 of a millimeter, but I still notice it. Now that I've had it for about 6 months, it's getting a few scratches, which it might not get those scratches if it were sapphire. So that's all I want to say about it. I think other than the price, I really enjoy this watch. It's 47 millimeters. The case is 47 millimeters. So that makes it kind of big, and I like a big watch. So I've really enjoyed this watch, even though I have somewhat replaced it by now because I just bought a new one. You can buy this watch. So let's just go through the details. So this is an automatic self-charging watch with a backside window. Some would say it looks a lot like a Rolex, and it's a great watch with a rotating bezel. The bezel insert, I believe, is steel. Well, it is steel. As opposed to ceramic, which I would prefer. But this is a good watch. This watch you can buy for about $100. So Invicta, they make a bunch of crap watches, but they also make some really good ones. So you just have to cherry pick the one that you want. But Invicta is famously known as the $100 Rolex. So you're getting a Rolex appearance with damn good quality. I mean, Rolexes now are copied, and some of them appear to be made in China. So, I mean, Rolex, the only people who buy Rolexes are people who like Rolexes and want to have one. Everybody can have whatever they want. But the other group, probably bigger group of people who buy Rolex, they're just buying it for the name. So I saw a video on watches last night, and it was really intelligent video. The guy said, "Are you buying your watch for the watch, or are you buying your watch for the watching? Are you buying your watch so that other people respond to it and say, hey, that's a cool Rolex? Or are you buying it because you want it?" So this is I just think this is a great watch. For $100, this is a great watch. And it's great. The reason I have it off the band, excuse me, the reason I have it off the band right now is because I wore it last week in some sandy water. It wasn't like nasty sand, or it wasn't like big waves or anything, but yeah, the water had a little bit of sand in it, and it jammed up the bezel, and that sucks. So I've tried a few times myself to get the bezel off and clean it, but I haven't been able to do it. So I'm just going to take it somewhere and get it serviced. But this is a damn good Rolex level quality, good looking watch, 47 millimeters for $100. That's a damn good deal. The reason I replaced that watch with perfect timing, because now it's jammed up with sand. The reason I replaced that watch with this watch is because, like I said, I'm kind of obsessive about things sometimes. And I currently am obsessive about knowing what day of the week it is. So I bought a watch that has what's called an additional complication. So all watches obviously tell time, but if they do anything more than that, those are called complications. So the date feature is a complication, and the next level of date features would be date and day. So this is how I know it's Friday, and it's as long as I'm not totally clueless about the month, then I can figure out that today is January 2nd. So this watch is, for me, even though it's small, this is 42 millimeters, the other one's 47. I prefer the bigger watch. But this one only comes at 42, and that's a little bit small for me. But whatever, you know, you can wear whatever size you want or whatever. I've obviously got this one with a bracelet that was given to me by a guy in Barcelona, and this other one that I love. It's two leopards. I don't know if you can see it. It's two leopards kind of holding onto a ring. I bought it on Amazon, even though supposedly it was made in Italy, and it's not very well made. So I had to pass a cord through it because otherwise it falls off my wrist. So that kind of sucks, but that's what I had to do. And I do love the bracelet, even though it's not very well made. But let's go to the watch. So this one obviously has a green face to it. Green happens to be my favorite color, followed by brown. So that's why I bought this particular color. You can obviously buy black or blue. Those are the most common colors. So the most common is black. The next most common is blue. And then after that, usually green. But even green is a little rare, and very rare to find a watch that has date and day and green. And in this case, the bezel is ceramic. So you can see the bezel moves very well. And I like the fact that it's ceramic. I like the fact that it's green because, like I already said, green is my favorite color. If it weren't green, I could do what I did with the other watch, which is buy a green strap for it. But in this case, I wanted a metal strap. And this watch kicks big butt. I love it. Except I wish it was I wish it were bigger. Like I said already, it's 42. I would prefer a 45 or 47. But I like the fact that the crown is offset, because then it doesn't conflict as much with my other bling. But like I said, I wanted date and day. It's got a nice bezel. It's green. It's a ceramic bezel. It doesn't have the window in the back, so it's a little bit of a point deduction. That's all I want to say about this watch. I love it. The other thing is I just started wearing my wedding ring again, and you can see that my wedding ring has a band of emeralds. I actually bought this when I first met my wife back in 2014. And so now that I'm actually wearing my wedding ring with the emeralds, then it goes well with the green of the watch. But obviously you can do whatever combination you want. Some of you know that emeralds are pretty fragile. They're not strong like diamonds. So the only thing holding these emeralds in is super glue. But you know me, I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I just want to wear it. So the last detail about this watch is how much did I pay for it? I guess we could talk about movements too. So at some point in your knowledge of watches, you would want to know the details like what's the movement. This watch, the other watch, the Invicta that I looked at with you just a moment ago, has a Miyota movement. That's a Japanese movement. That's fine. This one runs about 5 minutes fast every month. That's not so great, but you know, it's still an awesome watch. This watch, I haven't had enough history with it to know if it runs fast or slow. I've only had it for less than a week now. But let's see what it says on the back. Water resistant to 200. It does have a sapphire crystal, so that gives it some more points. So sapphire, ceramic, bezel, date and day gets some extra points. And it also has a safety clasp here, so it gets some extra points for that because I don't want to lose it. But again, the problem is, yeah, it's a safety clasp, but it's a safety clasp held together by push pins, which are kind of weak. Like if I were in a crowd or on a bus and somebody wanted to pull this off my arm, they could probably pull it off, just like with any other watch. So again, the last detail about this watch is how much did it cost? So for me, this is, again, except for the size, this is about as good as it gets for a watch. And I don't need more of a watch than this. Green, ceramic, sapphire, day and date, and it's automatic. That's pretty much ass kicking. So this watch cost about $120. So you can have a kick-ass multi-purpose watch for about $100. Again, this big boy was $120, or is $120. I've seen them. It depends on some of the details, like the color of the bezel. Like I wanted a solid black bezel, so I had to pay $120 for it. But some other ones are either blue and red or black and green, and those are, for whatever reason, they're a little cheaper. You can also buy this watch in a slightly smaller size. Like I said, this one's 47. You can buy a 42 and that'll be cheaper. So that's why this is called the $100 Rolex, because it looks, functions, feels, acts like a Rolex for $100. And then you can use your money for other things, like actually having a life experience or helping somebody else have a good life experience. Again, this is my favorite watch right now, and I paid $120 for it. So there it is. That's my introduction to watches. I'll probably talk about my other watches at some point. Not that they're anything like glorious or anything, but just to give you perspective. But again, the rule of watches is the same as the rule of wine. Buy whatever the hell you want, as long as you like it and you're willing to pay for it, it's the right watch for you. What I always do, and what I'm planning to do right now, is here's the other one. Anytime I buy a watch, for the most part, but I don't want to have like some big ass watch collection. I'm not trying to be that guy. I think that's ridiculous. I want to have a dress watch, a casual watch, a sports watch, and then possibly like a digital plastic solar watch for doing things like going to the beach and not ruining my other watches. So maybe 4 watches and I'm done. Again, like a dress watch, a casual watch, a sports watch like this for everyday use, and then a mud watch basically. Because all these mechanical watches are going to have little grooves and crevices and spaces that even on a normal day could get filled up with dirt and grime, and then you got to get it serviced. And I'm not that guy. So again, a dress watch, a casual watch, a sports watch, and then a mud watch, and you're done. So now that I have purchased an extra watch or two, I got to give them away. So anytime I buy a watch, I always give one of my old watches away. So as soon as I get this one cleaned and fixed, I'm going to give it away to whoever. And likewise with this watch that I don't use anymore, even though it's a great watch. This is also an automatic watch. It's bronze, and it does have a bezel. And I think it's a sapphire crystal. It's closed off in the back because it's a limited edition watch. And it's a great watch. It's macho, it's functional, it's tough, and I also don't need to have it. And so I'm going to give it away to like my brother-in-law or something like that. So again, and this watch was way more expensive. This watch was like 8 times the price of this one. It's just the decision I made at the time. And it has some history to it. I got this watch on like a Friday or a Saturday, and then the next day I had a big ass bike accident and I scratched the watch and paralyzed my arm for a while. So it does have some history. But anyway, like I said, anytime I buy a watch or anything else for that matter, like my goal in life is not to collect stuff, even though every once in a while I want something new. If I buy something new for myself, it usually means I'm giving something away to whoever. It could be the maintenance man, it could be the guy who's remodeling my bathroom at some point in time. Or it could be, somebody in our family, or just some young man who needs a little bit of inspiration and kind of upgrade the quality of his life. The video that I saw a great video last night. I'll put that on the same page. And I also saw a great video right now, totally spontaneously. I was just taking a break and this video came up in the algorithm and it was really great. It was called The Surprising Psychology of Watches or Watch Wearing or something like that. And it was really great. So I'll include both of those videos somehow linked with this video. But again, a tradition among men has been to give them a gift of a watch, a decent watch, not some plastic piece of crap. But, like back in the day, like in the United States, when men used to work in the same job for like 20 years, 50 years, they used to get a watch. I don't know at what time point, but I guess it was usually like 10 years, 25 years, and I don't know how it could be 50 years. But, employers used to actually value their employees and give them gifts for their loyalty. I don't think that happens anymore. But it is a tradition among men that men give a good watch to other men. And so I do that with the men that I know. I've given, for example, my wife has 2 brothers. I've given both of them watches and they both love the hell out of those watches. So yeah, that's my watch story for the day. I'll do another watch story at some point, but I have had this on my mind for a while as a topic. And now you've seen the first part of it. That probably conveys most of what I want to say about watches. The other thing that I did see recently, talking about like the mechanics of a watch, and this is just purely aesthetic, but if you're a man, woman, or other who respects craftsmanship and quality work, then that's another reason to get a watch that you like, So like when I look at this watch, even though it's not like super fancy or anything, remember it was only $120. when I look at this watch, I appreciate, the fact that it was engineered and designed and machined, and a lot of work went into making this thing function and keep time, keep the date, and keep the day solely activated by, my own physical activity. So I respect that and I like it, and that's part of enjoying a watch, is respecting kind of the work and maybe even the history that went into it. So I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're all enjoying the first few days. Most of you are on vacation. The first few days of 2026, which for us Americans is going to be a hell of a year, as I mentioned recently. So that's all I'm going to say. I'll close out this video. This has been Dr. Vasquez, the OG, coming to you live and talking about watches. Take care and have a great weekend. Bye. So I'm the original gangster of vitamin D.
OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster.
In 2004, I wrote The Vitamin D Paradigm Shift, and I'll provide you a copy of that if you haven't already seen it. So right now, I'm going to use my own acronym for studying pharmacology. We're going to talk about function, administration, cautions, interactions, laboratory testing, and any other details on top of that. So that's the way that I describe and have structured my presentation on pharmacology. I call it the Facile Pharmacology acronym. And thanks again to all of the paid subscribers. Otherwise, I'd be doing something else. But because of your commitment, I likewise return that commitment by talking about new stuff or reviewing stuff that I've talked about before, in this case, a little bit of both. So let's talk about the pharmacology of vitamin D.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
I'm an old soul, got a funky sound. Gonna sing a song, turn the world around.
Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live on the 23rd of November. November is a very important month for several reasons. First of all, most of you aren't getting enough vitamin D from sunlight anymore, if you ever were. So as we transition from summer, let's say, to winter, a lot of you are going to become vitamin D deficient. So that's why I'm talking about vitamin D today. The other important thing that happened in November of 2025 is that we finally got our freaking floors finished, which means I could paint the baseboards, which means right now, even though I did that 3 days ago, it smells like the back end of Chernobyl in here. And that's why I have a fan on in the background. So if you hear some background noise from the fan, that's what it is. Because if it were not for that fan, I would probably be intoxicated on the remaining paint fumes, which hopefully will continue to evaporate over the next day or two. But as it is right now, it still smells like paint solvent. The other thing that happened in November of 2025 of major historical importance is that the United States is now completely insane under the chaos of Donald Trump. So over the last few months, just as an example, so Trump has attacked every body of importance in the United States, from teachers to nurses to attorneys to military. And within the last couple of months, under Trump, the United States has killed innocent people in international waters. So as a consequence of that, some politicians responded saying, hey, you can't do that, and the military shouldn't be complicit in carrying out illegal acts. So in response to that public service announcement, which should have been obvious to anybody, Trump said that those American politicians who created that announcement should be punished by death, because he said that they're traitors, and what was the other word, sedition, I think he used? That's a big word for Trump. Oh, so the United States is now just completely insane. So like I said recently, earlier this year I did a video saying, you know, international flexibility is the new stability. And that was just kind of a vague, abstract idea. It's like, well, you know, things are getting kind of weird, but internationally. So you're better off if you have some flexibility. So I talked about travel, I talked about international bank accounts, I talked about learning another language, because let's say if you only speak English, but then you learn some Spanish, then you've got like a whole nother big chunk of the world available to you. If you only speak English, which English is a great language for many reasons, but, you know, you're still limited to North America, not even North America, Canada, the United States, UK, New Zealand, Australia, a few countries in Africa, I think, speak only English. If that's where you want to live, that's great, but if you want to have other options, then you have to give yourself some flexibility. So like I was saying, you know, I did a conversation earlier this year talking about, oh, well, you might want some flexibility. And then it's like, oh, well, look what's happening in the United States. Things are getting worse. And it keeps getting worse to the point of utter insanity. And now by November of 2025, I think we will look back on this month as the month of America's departure from any beneficent reality. With Trump saying that American politicians who try to enforce normal law, like avoiding or disobeying illegal commands, now he's saying that should be punishable. He is saying it, so you can't deny that he said it. He did say it. He wrote it. It's published. He said that they were traitors, guilty of sedition, and punishable by death. Absolutely fucking insane. So the way that occurred to me this morning is that the United States is it's not collapsing through neglect, it's being dismantled. Every aspect of American life is being dismantled under Trump in 2025. In only 10 months. I mean, if this has happened within 10 months, I mean, the United States would be unrecognizable if it even could continue to exist for another 3 years under the same direction. But I don't think Trump will be in office 6 months from now, unless he changes. I mean, he could always change course. He could always be better managed. But if he continues in his current trajectory, he won't be in office 6 months from now. I mean, I just don't see how it's possible. But I've been surprised before. I thought Americans would be more rebellious than they have been, starting with the pandemic, and they never did anything of any, international significance. A few protests here and there. Politicians don't care about your protests. Give me a break. All right, so now that I rambled on a little bit about politics, let's talk about vitamin D. So as I said, here we are in November, and this is a time when people are transitioning out of summer and exposure to sunlight and transitioning into winter, and so people are going to be more vitamin D deficient. So I will focus now on the pharmacology of vitamin D. Obviously, I've talked about vitamin D now for 21 years. Amazing. 21 years. So I'm the original gangster of vitamin D.
I ain't no superhero, I ain't no Marvel comic, but when it comes to game, I'm atomic and dropping it straight point blank and untwisted. No imagination needed, cause I lived it. This ain't no fucking joke, this shit is real to me. I'm Ice-T, O.G.
OG, original gangster.
So I'm the original gangster of vitamin D.
OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster. OG, original gangster.
In 2004, I wrote The Vitamin D Paradigm Shift, and I'll provide you a copy of that if you haven't already seen it. So right now, I'm going to use my own acronym for studying pharmacology. We're going to talk about function, administration, cautions, interactions, laboratory testing, and any other details on top of that. So that's the way that I describe and have structured my presentation on pharmacology. I call it the Facile Pharmacology acronym. And thanks again to all of the paid subscribers. Otherwise, I'd be doing something else. But because of your commitment, I likewise return that commitment by talking about new stuff or reviewing stuff that I've talked about before, in this case, a little bit of both. So let's talk about the pharmacology of vitamin D, starting with functions. So you have a nuclear vitamin D receptor. You also have a membrane vitamin D receptor, especially in the brain. Everybody knows that vitamin D participates in calcium absorption and calcium balance to some extent. So let me give you an example of both of those. So in the gut, vitamin D promotes the absorption of calcium. However, when the body has sufficient calcium, then that lowers parathyroid hormone levels. And when parathyroid hormone levels are lower, that changes the intracellular, extracellular balance of calcium ions, and that has a huge impact on metabolism and inflammatory balance and things like that. So another way of saying that is that the quantitative difference or the quantitative impact that vitamin D has on calcium balance becomes a qualitative metabolic distinction, let's say, because as I already said, with let me say it in reverse this time. When people are vitamin D deficient, they're not absorbing calcium as they should. Because of that, the body compensates by increasing the excretion of parathyroid hormone. When that happens, that's a kind of a desperate attempt by the body to maintain serum calcium levels. And that's where most people live most of the time, in a state of either, you could call it compensation or you could call it reasonably decompensation, because it is a pathological state. When parathyroid hormone levels elevate to maintain serum calcium, that not only maintains the level of serum calcium, but it changes the intracellular balance of calcium as well to raise intracellular calcium levels. When that happens, that changes gene expression. So the balance of calcium, which is affected by many different things, one of the most important is vitamin D. The other really important thing is kind of systemic acid-base balance, pH, which you can measure. I've talked about this, and I've written about it for years, but I've talked about this before if you look at my videos on urine pH. That also changes calcium balance, and when we change calcium balance, we change the intracellular content of calcium. When we do that, that affects gene expression and inflammatory balance. So that's, one way of looking at vitamin D to understand its importance. Let's see. Let me just reintroduce something, because I did a separate introduction to this video, but I think now in the kind of cleaner version, I haven't explained why I have this exhaust fan on in the back, and that's because we got new floors finally, and that means I painted the baseboards, and that means it kind of smells like paint in here, so that's why I have a fan on in the background. Anyway, that's just some background information. Vitamin D, as I state here, also plays a role, I already kind of said this in a way, in immunomodulation. It's anti-inflammatory, counteracts intracellular hypercalcinosis. That's a phrase that I coined back in 2006. I published an article on that. And it's an important concept. Intracellular hypercalcinosis is a pathologic state, pathophysiologic state. Vitamin D improves and protects the brain. It has an antidepressant role, an anti-anxiety role, improves gut function barriers and the microbiome. Oh, and so here's what I added just a few days ago to give you another kind of perspective on vitamin D. So like the old way of looking at vitamin D is that, it just helps you absorb calcium and that makes your bones stronger. I mean, come on. Anybody who limits their conversation to that these days is just completely out of touch. Variously described, as I state here, almost 3,000 DNA binding sites for the vitamin D receptor. So vitamin D has a massive impact on human gene expression, a significant effect on the activity of more than 200 genes, which is at least 3%, and it's way more than that. But let's just say 3% of the human genome. So here's something I want to say. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I'm just it's a little bit hearsay. But I think at one point I heard that, like, the difference between a human being and a chimpanzee was only like 1% of the genome or something like that. So so let's just assume, for the sake of conversation, maybe that's true. I'll have to look it up. But if only 1% of the genome is different between a human and a chimpanzee, then put that in perspective. If 3% of your genome is impacted or regulated by vitamin D, I mean, that's just huge. I mean, look at the difference between you and a chimpanzee. For some humans, it's a huge difference. So anyway, moving on from that, administration. Yeah, so for kids, and I said this back in the article back in 2004. A really important article was published on The Lancet. This was a life-changing, paradigm-shifting article published on The Lancet by Hipponen and his or her group from Sweden, I believe. This was a 30-year study with more than 10,000 kids, and they gave those kids, and they were all they were infants. I describe them here as children, but more accurately, they were infants, less than 1 year of age. And they got 2,000 international units of vitamin D and had I think it was a 78% reduction in type 1 diabetes. For adults, we could typically use 4,000 to 10,000 international units, assuming that they don't have sarcoidosis, tuberculosis, Crohn's disease, or they're not taking hydrochlorothiazide. So those are all risk factors for developing hypercalcemia. I've discussed that before in my review article that I'll provide you access to. Interactions, again, interactions with drugs and disease. So sarcoidosis, tuberculosis, and Crohn's disease, those are called granulomatous diseases. Some types of leukemia, lymphoma should also be on that list. Granulomatous diseases increase the risk for developing hypercalcemia. So does hydrochlorothiazide. I've only seen that in one patient, but it was enough to make me concerned. Deficiency of vitamin D is promoted by inflammation, infection, steroids, anti-seizure drugs, and magnesium deficiency. So a lot of people are deficient in magnesium, usually about 70% of the population, and that's even by some kind of loose criteria. The conversation there is that you have to have magnesium in order to properly metabolize vitamin D, but you also have to have vitamin D to properly absorb magnesium. So obviously that can result in a vicious cycle. Lab tests monitor for hypercalcemia every once in a while. 25-hydroxy vitamin D3 is the test for measuring vitamin D levels, and we want that optimized in most people between 50 and 90 nanograms per milliliter. Again, that's for most people who don't meet some of our concerns and contraindications listed above. A few other comments. This should be routine use. No controversy here. No controversy for anybody who can actually read, unless you're one of the 16,000 people in the Endocrine Society, because the Endocrine Society, as a professional organization, mostly of physicians and endocrinologists, they can't figure out what the fuck to do with vitamin D. And they state in their 2024 guidelines that vitamin D is such a confusing topic, we shouldn't even do the lab test for it, because we don't know how to interpret the lab test. That is from a professional organization with 16,000 members, and in 2024, which was a solid 23 years, 20 years is what I should have said. That was a solid 20 years after I wrote the vitamin D paradigm. And now they're saying, oh, well, we don't know how to measure vitamin D levels, and if we measured them, we wouldn't know how to interpret them. And even if we could interpret them, we wouldn't know what to do with them. That is the epitome of medical stupidity for strategic purposes. And I'll show you this. I'll show you why on one of the upcoming slides. In fact, I'll show it to you on this slide. So this is a slide I made back in 2021. The constellation of vitamin D impact on inflammation, hypercoagulation, and immunomodulation. So in one image, conceptual image obviously, this explains to you why the medical profession can't fucking figure out vitamin D to save their fucking lives, right? They can't figure it out. They fuck up the research. Every commentary in a big journal like in JAMA or something like that is going to say, well, we don't know what to do about vitamin D. It's controversial. It's controversial because they publish crap and they don't know how to read
They don't know how to read, period, let alone read research to any level of detail. But what I've shown you in this diagram, which is excerpted from one of my videos, so if you want to see the context for this conversation, look on my blog for the vitamin D gold mine, and you'll see where this came from. I think this was video number 5. So this image, as I already started to say, this explains the importance of vitamin D. And when we understand the importance of vitamin D, you'll also therefore understand why the medical profession has to bullshit every conversation about vitamin D, because vitamin D is so important for the human body that if people had adequate vitamin D, they wouldn't need so many anti-inflammatory drugs, analgesic drugs, anti-anxiety drugs, antidepressant drugs, antihypertensive drugs, anti-cancer drugs. I mean, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar drug market that is sustained by keeping the population deficient in vitamin D. And so that's why they can never understand it. The Endocrine Society says, well, we don't know how to test for vitamin D deficiency, and even if we knew how to test for it, we wouldn't know how to treat it. Well, look, I wrote the vitamin D paradigm shift in 2004. From start to finish, I was invited by the journal to write the article. From start to finish, I wrote that whole article in 10 days. Without any support. It's not like I was in some academic center, with a bunch of faculty and staff collaborating on this document. No, I wrote the damn thing in 10 days. Gil Manso, here's the other thing. So this was before I went to medical school. I went to medical school starting in 2006. I wrote this article in 2004. So in order for this article to qualify for continuing medical education, they said I had to have a medical doctor as a co-author. Well, so I got Gil Manso to sign off on it. Gil Manso and I worked together in the same office for about 6 years. It was his office, and I'm forever grateful that he let me work with him. He was a good doctor, a lot of experience, some radical ideas at times, and he helped me immensely in my life for getting into medical school and all these kinds of things. So anyway, he said, yeah, I'll sign my name to it. But he didn't do anything. John Cannell, literally at the last minute. So like I said, I wrote the whole thing within about 10 days. After I wrote it, I sent it to John Cannell, who's a medical doctor. I think he's a psychiatrist. And he's the president of the Vitamin D Council. So he's a vitamin D expert. So I sent it to him. I said, hey, take a look at it. He said, well, you didn't talk about diabetes and hypertension. And I said, no, I ran out of time. I said I had to do the whole damn thing in 10 days. So he said, I'll write the 2 paragraphs on vitamin D and hypertension and diabetes. So that's what he did. And the other thing that he did, I wanted to push for a more radical, higher level for vitamin D optimization. He said, no, he said, if you're too progressive with this, people will reject it because they're not ready for it. He said, you can be right, but you also have to write something that, the population can accept with this current level of knowledge and ignorance. So I was like, okay, I'll compromise. So I think I wanted to say the optimal range should be 50, which is what I have said since then. But I think we compromised at the time and we just said 45. We'll look at that in just a moment. Anyway, going back to this diagram before I move on. Vitamin D impacts, and in a certain sense, we could say controls 3% of the human genome. So it's of major importance. Because of that, when people are vitamin D deficient, which is the reality for 70% of the human population, let's say, they're chronically dysfunctional and sick. And for that reason, they are a profit center for the medical drug cartel. And for that reason, the medical drug cartel wants to protect its market by keeping people vitamin D deficient. So I'm going to read everything on the page here. So vitamin D has an important impact on controlling inflammation, coagulation, metabolism, mitochondria, therefore obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes, cellular defense against infections, defense in terms of barriers as well. We'll show you that on the next page. The elaboration of certain antimicrobial proteins. Also, again, immune balance. So immunity and inflammation are obviously connected, but they're obviously different as well. So we can reasonably state for the past 21 years, we can state that vitamin D has an anti-inflammatory effect. That's true, but it also affects immune balance, and that's connected to but different from inflammation. So that's why I say here immune tolerance. As I stated before, vitamin D also plays a role in the deficiency or synergy with other nutrients such as magnesium. Apparently magnesium, apparently also selenium, and I would also state probably, I think we'll eventually see, I think eventually the research will show that vitamin D plays a role in the metabolism of lithium as well. Vitamin D impacts the microbiome in a way that's actually quite interesting. Maybe I'll talk about that in just a moment before I get off this page. Psychosocial, again, when people are vitamin D deficient, they become more depressed and more anxious. Chemical and metal toxicity, in this exact moment, I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that, other than to just kind of claim perhaps that vitamin D, through its neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory roles, would kind of indirectly support a person against the toxicity of chemicals and metals. Messengers and hormones, as I stated before, intracellular calcium is considered, it's a classic example of a second messenger. One that actually promotes disease, dysfunction, cancer, inflammation, insulin resistance, hypertension. So when we optimize vitamin D status, we're also pushing in the direction of optimizing intracellular calcium balance. Obviously other things are at play there as well. And as I already said, neuroinflammation is a component of many different problems: anxiety, depression, addiction, alcoholism, depression and anxiety, but also food intake and metabolic balance as specifically related to diabetes, obesity, and insulin resistance. So again, with vitamin D, we can control to some extent neuroinflammation, or we can modulate it, and that has effects throughout the body. So again, the more you appreciate the value and the roles of vitamin D, the more you'll appreciate why the medical profession wants to be ignorant of these topics, because they don't want to give you an inexpensive, unpatentable, uncontrollable option that makes your entire health better. And that's before, as I show you on this page, and that's before we even talk about the amazing impact of vitamin D against acute viral infections, especially COVID. So, as I showed you here in this slide, this was back in 2021, I think. Yeah, 2021. Vitamin D has a remarkable impact in improving inflammatory balance, immune balance, barrier defense against infections, and immune function in general, and also recovery from infectious diseases. So when you talk about an infectious disease, like I state here, and this is the model that I created back in 2014 when I wrote the book on it, Antiviral Nutrition, any given infection has at least four main components, and you're looking at them here. Acquisition, replication, immunonutrition, or immune function per se, and cellular impact, systemic impact, and recovery from the infection. And vitamin D plays a major role in improving all of those. That's why in the clinical trials using vitamin D, we saw 70 to 80% literal salvation of these acute COVID patients. Well, what's the medical profession going to do in response to such a miraculous and inexpensive benefit? They are going to, of course, blacklist vitamin D. I'll show you that in just a moment. So let me go back one aspect. So here's the vitamin D paradigm shift that I wrote back in 2004. I'll provide you a copy of that. Here's the optimal range that I published in 2011. Again, pushing back up to at least 50 or at least 125 nanograms per, nanomoles per liter. I need to check that and make sure that's correct. So here, this was in 2021, more or less, at the end of 2020. This is when I wrote this, or kind of constructed this infographic on the optimal serum 25 hydroxy vitamin D level. Again, starting at 50 nanograms per milliliter, which again, confirming, is 125 nanomoles per liter. I have to look around my camera just to make sure I'm reading that correctly. I'll provide you these images on the website. So, again, 2020, 2021, I wrote a few articles. You can get this one online for free. Vitamin D pharmacology infographic. I'm going to show you these graphics in just a moment. Physiologic dosing, which means daily or weekly dosing, versus bolus dosing, which is what the medical profession wants to do. So let's see what this shows us. So this is what you would expect. With physiologic dosing of vitamin D, 5,000 international units per day, you get a gradual increase in the active, biologically important form of vitamin D, which is 25 hydroxy vitamin D. Some of you will disagree with what I just said because you don't know and you don't understand the pharmacology of vitamin D. Because what I just said is the reverse of what most people are taught about vitamin D. Everybody is taught that the active form of vitamin D is 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3, and that is not correct. That is the pharmacologically more potent form, but it exists in nanomolar amounts, or microscopic amounts, let's say. In contrast, you have more 25 hydroxy vitamin D, and so even though it's pharmacologically weaker, you have so much more of it that it accounts for 80% of the biologic activity at the vitamin D receptor. So 25 hydroxy vitamin D is the measurement marker, let's say, of vitamin D, but it's also 80% of the activity. So it's not just an indirect or surrogate marker. It is your vitamin D status. If you double the dose of vitamin D from 5,000 units to 10,000 units, then you only get a slight, you'll notice that it's kind of plateauing, you get a slight increase in 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels. Normalization of PTH occurs at, as I've said before, 32 and 80, as you can see on this page. So either way you look at it, with 5,000 international units per day, you're normalizing most people. You're not optimizing them, you're normalizing them. And with 10,000 units, you get a little higher. And that's probably more advisable. Now, that's doing it right. So let me go back. I'll just show you what's doing it right. This is doing it right. Now, let's look at how the medical profession does it, because they do it wrong. What you'll see in a lot of studies in the medical world, when they're trying to make vitamin D look ineffective, the strategy that they use is called bolus dosing. Bolus dosing means giving a huge dose, either 100,000 units, 200,000 units, or 600,000 units, because they think that, oh, well, it's a fat-soluble nutrient, so we'll just give you a lot of it,